up next, we have the one, the only Logan Price. Now, Logan, you have quite the impressive career. You are a software engineer, coach at US Bank, where you help develop talent, a lot like our talented audience here today. And I cannot wait to hear from you. The floor is yours.
Hi, yeah, thanks for having me this morning. Hope everybody's having a good morning out there. So I really took a lot of time thinking about like what I wanted to talk to you about, like putting myself back in the shoes of kind of what I was thinking when I was, in middle school or high school or even early college. And personally, I didn't know a whole lot growing up. So I actually prepared a couple slides, just kind of to go off some of the themes and hopefully debuff some of the myths that might be out there about tech. So let me share my screen and we will get started. Uh, okay. Sorry, a few technical difficulties. Haven't actually had to pull up a Zoom meeting in a while. Um, but so probably skip the slides. So basically, there's a couple of different myths out there around tech, right? So uh, typically, what you know, at least a lot of my colleagues, their story starts off something like this: they started programming usually when they were, sophomores or juniors in high school. Um, got into a four-year institution. Um, you know, got getting a degree in computer science or software engineering. Interned, at three or four companies during their time in college. Graduated with a 3.7. Got a job at a good company and have been working as a software engineer since. Right. Um, that's one path to have a successful career, but it's not the only path, right? Um, there's multiple different paths and multiple different ways to get into a career in technology, right? Personally, myself, I've had, I want to say, 9 or 10 different job titles, right? I've done help desk, I've been a system administrator, I've been a software developer, I've spent time managing people, I've been a coach, I've done all these different things, right? And each one of those experiences kind of shaped me into the engineer and essentially has shaped my career to be what it is today. So like, don't think that you have to, have this one set path and that's the only way to do it, right? There's a lot of different ways to get to the same goal. Um, so thinking back to like when I was in middle school, high school, right? I had no idea essentially what I wanted to do, right? I knew that as a person who liked building things. So I always thought that, I would be somewhat of like a civil engineer or architect or something of those sorts, right? Computer science and software engineering never actually ever popped on my radar, right? There's a lot of reasons for that, right? I grew up in an area where I didn't actually have my first computer class, just typing class, until I was in the sixth grade. Um, None of my family was, you know, involved in computers. I knew nobody that I grew up around with, had a degree in IT or anything of the sort, right? So a lot of it was just kind of you don't know what you don't know, right? And that's fine, right? So there's, you know, like I said, I started off wanting to be a civil engineer, right? You can change your mind multiple times, right? It's really about kind of having that open mind and finding out what you're passionate about and what you're curious about, and pursuing those things, right? Which kind of comes back to taking chances and really just trying new things and figuring out kind of what you do like, but also more importantly, find out what you don't like, right? I do a lot of mentoring, and one of the things I always tell people is find out what you don't like, because it's a lot easier to find out what you do like once you can eliminate some of the stuff that you don't like. Um, but yeah, I knew nothing about tech, um, nothing about being a software engineer until maybe like my sophomore year in high school, maybe junior year. Um, when I had a teacher actually brought it up as a suggestion for something I should look into when I thought about going off to school. Um, but like I went through and I did some research and I had like a bunch of ideas about what I thought a software engineer was, right? I thought that, a software engineer has to be this super smart math person, right? When really the real thing that math really teaches you is, how to be a good problem solver, how to think logically, and how to kind of diagnose a problem down to its parts to eventually solve it, right? That's really what a lot of the math really teaches you as far as preparing for a career in tech. Um, I also thought that, a programmer was just somebody who built websites, right? When we think about, when I think about how I interacted with technology growing up, everything was a website, right? Everything was either some shopping site, some game form, some video games. I really didn't think that video games were programming, but at the time I just thought, okay, as a programmer, you just build websites, right? That's not the case. There's actually a lot of different components involved in even running a specific website or just in software development in general, right? There's people who have to, manage databases. There's people who are writing what we call backend code for APIs to actually make the data available to the website, so that each one of us can view the information, right? If we think about something like Target.com, there's hundreds and millions of API calls being made just to provide that shopping experience to you. So there's a bunch of different aspects as well as just like support and other different parts that go along with technology. Um, I also thought that as a developer, like I would spend most of my time in a cave, like in a basement, like that's dimly lit, just writing code all by myself and not interacting with people. And that couldn't be any farther from the truth. Developing software is actually a very um, social activity, right? You have to talk to scrum masters and product owners. You have to talk to other engineers. You have to talk to customers. Um, I prefer pair programming, which is meaning when I write code, I'm writing it with somebody else. It's not just me sitting at my computer with my headphones on, knocking out code, which is something that you definitely can do, but a lot of times you end up with better code and a more enjoyable experience if you're doing it with somebody else, right? It's part of being part of a team, right? Um, the other thing that I thought about is just like, well, is a career in tech really something that's for me, right? When I kind of looked out, there's like certain companies and like people that I knew, right? I only saw a certain demographic really represented, right? I usually only saw, white males in their, between the ages of 21 and 42 or something like that, right? Um, and I really questioned if there was a spot for me in the industry. Um, and it wasn't until later on that I found that to be completely, a complete fallacy that was in my head. Like there is a spot for diversity inside of tech, right? No matter of what your age, sex, race, or sexual orientation is, like there's a spot for you in technology, and the culture across the industry is changing dramatically to be more accepting and more accommodating of you, right? So like if you think about just like women in tech, right? Some of the hugest advancements in technology were actually from women, right? You think about Grace Hopper. Um, she wrote the first compiler for any programming language ever, right? We think about Melissa Myers, formerly of Google and Yahoo, right? She was one of the earliest actual developers at Google. There's so many different cases of women contributing to the technical landscape and really providing a real impactful impact, I guess. Um, so eventually, I ended up going to school. I started off as an architecture major, realized that wasn't for me, and then my current wife at the time was actually a computer science major. So she actually got me. She actually kind of introduced me to technology because I was having an issue with one of my CAD programs for architecture, and then it just happened to be open source. So I actually like contributed, like taught myself how to code and fix a problem myself. But there's, like I said, there's a lot of different ways to get into it, and like a lot of it just has to do with just trying something, right? You don't know if you'll be good at it unless you try. Um, I also thought like I think about after like going through the process, right? I thought I had to be like the perfect candidate to get a job, right? Um, Kind of going back to that kind of analogy I went talked about at the beginning, right? I had to have three internships and have a perfect GPA and all these other things, right? When I was in school, I actually worked um, my whole time when I was in school, right? I was working 40 hours. I was going to class full time and still try to have somewhat of a social life, right? So I didn't actually have the amount of time to um, dedicate to my studies that I probably should have. So I wasn't the ideal candidate, but I had a lot of work experience that was relevant that actually is what actually set me apart from a lot of other candidates out there, right? So companies are really looking for people who have kind of like the good fundamentals and like have the ability to solve problems, work well with others, and the aptitude to learn. When it really comes down to it, I've done recruiting for Target when I was there. I do recruiting for U.S. Bank, and that's one of the things that across both of those companies that we both look for. Um, Also, another thing is that like you actually need a degree in computer science to have a great tech career. Um, that's not the case nowadays. It used to be. More and more companies are opening themselves up to different degrees, degrees from two-year institutions, as well as just taking in people from boot camps and other programs. Right? It's a lot more about showing the aptitude to do the job, and less about like the your accomplishments that you've had to get to that point. Right? Couple more points. Basically, through my career, I thought that I always had to be the smartest person in the room early on, right? And I realized that that's not always the best path to success. Just because your technical ability is good, doesn't mean you're guaranteed to have a good career in tech, right? There's a lot of soft skills that go into it, like learning how to talk to people, learning how to communicate, your status, knowing, you know, how to think about things from like a business impact standpoint and all of those things really go far as helping you propel yourself in a career in tech so that you can be successful. Um, and the last thing is like I always thought that the only way I could be successful is by like my own will, right? I couldn't have any help from anybody. And I found that to be the farthest thing from the truth. I have a couple mentors in my life who really helped me get to the point where I am as far as just being able to bounce ideas off of them um, and do all kinds of other things as far as just helping me think about things differently, right? So I guess my final thing that I'll leave you with is um, don't think that you have to do it all yourself. Build a support system around you. Find people who will challenge you. Find people who will give you advice, but not necessarily give you the answer, because it's so much more satisfying when you are able to kind of figure it out on your own without somebody just telling you what to do, right? I always think of a quote every time I actually think about I lead any kind of like coaching activity at US Bank, right? So I always say there's a African proverb out there that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So make sure that you have a good support system around you to encourage you and make sure that you can achieve all the goals that you have. So Um,
Awesome. Logan, you did that with technical difficulties, with no PowerPoint. You were so good off the cuff. We appreciate you sharing your story and doing some live myth busting about what we assume technology careers are about. So thanks for joining us
yes,
today.
thank you.